Hello, Willow.
Hi, how are you?
Okay, I can't hear you now. Please say once again.
Can you hear me now?
Now it's perfect. Now it's
Okay,
excellent. Yeah, fantastic.
wonderful.
Okay, great to have you here. Fantastic. I have already started your presentation, and the topic, as always, is absolutely fascinating.
Oh, great, great.
We've got
It's a fun
around
topic.
200 people who enrolled. So far, we've got 22 in the room.
Okay.
But with the capacity is up to 100, and of course we will be streaming this on Facebook. I just need to tell you that just now in my place is a terrible storm, absolute
Oh
mayhem.
no.
So there may be the moment that I'm not available for help. I will be on iPad, but when the Wi-Fi fails, I may have a bit of a problem. So
Okay.
please be patient. I will try to be around, but I hope the weather gets better.
Okay. Me too.
Yeah. How are you? How's the weather at your place?
Um, Actually today it's better. The air quality is moderate instead of unhealthy today. So it's getting better. But you know what, the fires, who knows? The air quality could be bad again tomorrow. So
Yeah,
yeah.
that's what I've heard. I hope it's going to be soon, well, much better.
Yeah, I hope so too. I mean, we have a long fire season still, so the rains won't be coming for a while, so
How about
cross
the
our fingers.
temperature? How about the temperatures?
The temperature's fine. It's probably in the 90s Fahrenheit here. It's San Jose is always quite hot. So, but since we're not outside at all, we're just trapped in our apartment. So, thank goodness for air conditioning.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we still have got around 5 minutes to go.
Okay.
And let's say hello to everybody. Hello, guys.
Hi, everyone. Where's everybody from today?
Yeah, please write down in the chat box where you guys from.
Okay, Nick.
Okay, so I'm off, and I'll try to be around. Okay.
Okay, great. Talk to you soon. Wow, St. Petersburg. Bolesławiec. St. Petersburg. Okay. Some new cities I don't know. Oh, from Belarus. Oh, Krakow, Łódź. How are things in Belarus? Radom, Wrocław. Wonderful. Oh no. Sorry to hear that. Poznan. Okay. Great. Oman, wow. Wrocław. I love that city. Krakow. Another great city. I haven't had a chance to see everything in Poland, but I've seen some of the major cities. From Algeria, wonderful. Welcome. Well, I'm in California right now, so it's about 11:30, sunny, smoky. Thanks for coming. Oh, Moscow. Wow. Rybnik. Where is Rybnik? I don't know that city. Nice to see you again, Joanna. I remember you too. Jaworzno, Poland. Ah, a few from there. I'm great. I would be better if we could go outside and do things, but thank you. It's a nice screen to hide everything else in my apartment. Oh, from Ukraine. Oh, Eva. Welcome. And I think we're going to get started in just a few minutes. Southern Poland, wonderful. Hi, Tina. How are you?
Always perfect when while participating in your webinar. I see your smile and all the sorrows are shifted away.
Well, you are a ray of sunshine as always.
Okay, guys, so I'm off. Lucina, great to see you again. And
thanks, Marcin, the same.
Could you please say a few words about Willow and we can start?
Okay, very well. So very briefly, because I always have a lot to say about Willow, but I think that quite a few of us teachers in Poland already know Willow. From the best side, there are no bad sides in the case of this wonderful person. Willow spent the last academic and school year at the University of Rzeszów. She was in the middle of the year, she was suddenly evacuated to the United States, but that was the situation. And this year she is in Opole, correct, Willow?
Yes.
Very well. So and that is the thing that I'm really optimistic about. And Willow is in the series of webinars is so kind to share her knowledge with us, which are organized both by IATEFL Poland, but also by the US Consulate in Krakow. And we are, I'm one of the participants. I'm really grateful to for having this opportunity to participate in these webinars. Very briefly, Willow's areas of interest: staff development, educational leadership, teacher training, and teaching as such. And she's a really experienced person with valuable intercultural experience. So she comes from California to begin with, but she's been to Osaka, Japan. She's been also to all other countries, but also South Korea, which is very interesting for me, especially because this is totally different culture from Western culture. And she has taught integrated skills, community, English as a second language, content-based courses. She knows Spanish. That is something that was really interesting for me. And also she has traveled around the world. And as far as her endorsements are concerned, I will just enumerate a few: curriculum design, adult education, lesson planning, higher education, literacy, and educational technology. The list goes on, but I just wanted to mention a few. And as everybody knows, today we will be talking about uncreative writing, and that is what is meant by writing in the digital age. Yes, and we will listen to Willow, hopefully discussing some ideas from uncreative writing, and then reacting to it somehow. And we will also explore all the implications of our language classrooms and try to answer this question: how do uncreative writing activities allow students to shine in communicative classes? And I like this statement very much, because this is what student-centered teaching is all about, and student-centered learning, yes, so that they feel not only a part of our classroom, as I always try to name my classroom, but also the stars on the sky. Yes, over to you.
Thank you so much, Lucina, for your enthusiastic introduction. So welcome everybody to the webinar Uncreative Writing, Writing in the Information Age. I see that we have a really international group, and that's wonderful. And I thank you for attending this webinar. I know that it's late in Poland, but in California, it's just before noon. So I appreciate not having to be up at 6 a.m. to give a webinar.
Okay, so I'm excluding myself.
Okay, thank you so much, Lucina. I will see you soon. So as Lucina said, my name is Willow Barnosky. I'm a virtual English language fellow. And what that means is I'm on an exchange program with the US Department of State. And last year I taught at the University of Rzeszów. And this year I'll be teaching at the University of Opole. And I'll be doing workshops, teacher trainings through the consulate in Krakow, the embassy in Warsaw, and with the regional English language office in Tallinn, Estonia. So today we're going to talk about, or tonight in Poland, we're going to talk about what is uncreative writing. And we're going to talk about how can uncreative writing help our students. And my presentation keeps disappearing. So as it disappears, I will just pull it right back up again. And we're going to talk about some ideas for uncreative writing. And at the end, we will have time for idea sharing and questions. For me, that's my favorite part of giving these webinars, is when people share their ideas, things they're doing in the classroom, things they want to do, and what ideas they took from the webinar. So when I'm presenting this, I'm going to share about 20 ideas for uncreative writing. And because IATEFL Poland often attracts this really wide range of teachers from different contexts, I'm going to be giving a lot of ideas that I hope you can adapt to your context, whether you're working with young learners, whether you're teaching university, working with older adults. So while I'm giving the presentation, I'd really like you to be thinking about if there is an idea or an activity that I present that you think you could use in your context, so that I know what's helpful and what sort of ideas interest you. And then at the end of the presentation, I'll ask you to share at least one idea that you think you can use in your context. Great. So the idea from this came from a book that I found in an art museum bookstore. When I was in Poland, I was able to travel a little bit. I got to hop over to the Netherlands for the first time. And at one of their amazing art museums, I found this book. And, as teachers, we're always looking for things that we can apply to our classrooms, or things that we can learn from and help use to help our students. So I found this book really interesting. It is by Kenneth Goldsmith, an American poet and professor. And he talks about how the digital environment impacts, or should impact, the way that we teach and learn writing. Now, he's at the University of Pennsylvania, so he was talking in his book most specifically about the university setting, but I found that his ideas could really be adapted for a lot of different contexts. So one of the things that Goldsmith said in his book is that we're facing this new condition in writing today because there is this unprecedented amount of text. So if you think of all the text online that our students have now, in addition to all of the printed texts that are available. So he said that right now, what's most important is the ability to manage, organize, distribute, move, and disseminate words and information instead of creating something new. And I thought this was a really fascinating premise. And I think, as educators, we always need to think about how we're preparing our students for the future. So I found this idea that writing is different, text is different now than it was in the past, to be a really, really interesting idea. He talks about the fact that when it comes to writing, we have this really outdated notion of genius. When you think about a writer, or imagine a writer, especially a famous writer or a critically acclaimed writer, we imagine this person sitting alone, maybe in their study, in their library, maybe, you know, somewhere in their home, and they are thinking of these new ideas. They are creating something original, and they're doing it alone. And he said in his book, and he quoted a literary critic, Marjorie Perloff, that now we actually have a lot of unoriginal geniuses, and the idea of a genius has expanded. So we think about a genius isn't someone who necessarily thinks up all of their ideas on their own, but they're someone that is taking ideas that already exist and using those to create something new or to create something different. So if you think about the visual arts compared to the literary arts, Goldsmith said that writing is so far behind the other arts in the sense that we allow for so much more experimentation, collaboration from the visual arts than we do from the literary arts, because we're really concerned about plagiarism. So if you think about the fact that it was over 100 years ago that Marcel Duchamp took a urinal, put it on a pedestal, signed it, and said, oh, this is ready-made art. And it was, I think it's now over 50 years since Andy Warhol was making all of his, you know, pop art, and he was taking pre-existing images and that sometimes multiplying them many times and saying this is art. So within the visual arts, we allow for a lot of this kind of copying, borrowing, and we think that's genius and that's really creative. So what is uncreative writing as defined in the book and in this workshop? It is any kind of writing in which students take some sort of pre-existing text and they reuse it, recycle it, and change it. Now it can be a story, a book, an online review, some words on a sign, but any sort of text that exists that the students take and they just use that text to make something new. So what does this have to do with our students and language teaching? And how can this help our students? So I think if you're like me, you probably have a lot of students who really fear writing or hate writing. You might even have students who don't like learning English or don't like learning a language. They maybe find it frightening, they maybe find it boring, but especially when it comes to writing, you know, our students also have that idea that writing is something that you go home and you do it alone. Or maybe you're at a bookstore, or a library, or coffee shop, but it's something that you need to think of the ideas, and you're staring at this blank page or this blank document on the screen, and you have to think about what you're going to write, how you're going to write it, and it can be really intimidating for some students. And especially students who have lower level writing skills or lower level language skills, that can just be terrifying because they really don't know how to write. So I love this quote from Jean Fowler, who's a journalist and writer, who says, "Writing is easy. All you need to do is stare at a blank sheet of paper until drops of blood form on your forehead." And I think that can be really true, especially when you have writer's block. But it often happens that when you have to write something, it just seems impossible. Where are these ideas going to come from? Where will the words come from? For many writers, writing the introduction or writing the first words is the most difficult. So I think this quote really illustrates how difficult many people find writing. So I think that by doing uncreative writing activities, we can help students to get past that fear of writing and to become better writers. So I think that using uncreative writing can motivate students to practice English because they can find the activities more interesting and fun. It can make them more creative or enable them to use their creativity in class. It can help students get over their fear of writing, and maybe they can actually like writing. I mean, I think as educators, our goal is always that we want our students to be as passionate about our subjects as we are. We want education and learning to be this positive experience. Using uncreative writing can encourage students to collaborate. It can give them a chance to warm up in the target language. So like, for example, I'm a student of Spanish, and sometimes I can't switch from thinking in English and writing in English to suddenly writing maybe academic things in Spanish, it's nice to have maybe a little intro activity or a little warm up to get me thinking in Spanish, to expose me to the language before I then switch and think in that language. So these can be activities that you do in class to get students into this, English thinking mindset for the rest of the class. It allows students to play with language. I mean, we always talk about how important playing with language is for language learners, but sometimes we don't really allow a lot of time for that in class. It can help students learn vocabulary and grammatical structures. It can be used to preview vocabulary or to review it. And I think one of the most important things, especially with academic writing, is it can really work as a scaffold to our students or provide a template for them to learn to do academic writing. It can be a cure for writer's block when you don't have to think of something from nothing. And it can be also, paradoxically, when we think of doing this uncreative writing, we're teaching students to, plagiarize, to steal ideas. But instead, paradoxically, by letting students steal or beg, borrow, and steal from other writers and from other texts, we're acknowledging, I know you've taken this text from somewhere else, so we need to source it. So you're giving students practice writing citations, learning the correct forms. And also by what Goldsmith found is that in his classes, by forcing students to borrow things and steal things from other texts, they became really just desirous of writing their own words. And they learned to be more creative and learned to become better writers, writing their own things from scratch because of having done all of these collaborative activities. And another thing I think too is, as an English learner, as a native speaker, when I was learning English and learning to write growing up, we spent so many years in class doing fun, creative writing activities. I didn't go from learning how to write a sentence to suddenly writing academic paragraphs or writing academic essays. So we had lots of chances to write a paragraph about what did you do this summer? What do you want to be when you grow up? We did lots of writing plays, writing poems, writing limericks, doing all of this fun playing with language so that we could develop really general English writing skills before then later using formal or academic English skills or writing skills. But I think what often happens in second language or foreign language classrooms, especially if we have students that are old enough to do academic writing in their first language, we think, oh, they already know how to do academic writing. We're going to skip right into academic writing. And we don't really give those students a chance to have fun writing fun things, writing creative things, writing, comical things that they can play around with. So I think this is also a good way that whenever we can make writing fun. I've definitely worked with students before who, from a very beginner level, like maybe from even like level A2, they were already being given templates of academic papers and being taught how to kind of mimic how to write an academic paper long before they even knew how to write coherent sentences or paragraphs in just general informal language. So I think it's really important we allow for that transition. And I'm seeing some comments on the side, and I will definitely get back to those comments. Okay, so for those of you who really, you insist that what you learn has to be directly applicable to academic writing, I have some ideas inspired by Goldsmith's book of how to use activities of uncreative writing to directly relate to teaching students how to do academic writing. So we do a lot of these things already. Often when we teach students to do academic writing or teach them a new genre of writing, we give them a model, we give them an example to look at. Often we break it down, like they learn how to do the introductory paragraph first and the body, etc. Sometimes we'll give them templates or sentence starters for certain parts of the essay. So we already are kind of doing that. We're already sort of letting students not exactly copy, but we're already giving them examples to learn from. But in Goldsmith's book, he actually talks about letting students use entire essays that have been written by others. So I was thinking that, when you give students an assignment in your class, especially if it's not the first time you've taught that class, you have previous semesters or years of students who have done that assignment, and you had some students who have done it really well. So one thing you can do is share some of those model essays written by students from previous years. And I think it's good to use essays from students from previous years. So maybe the students in the class don't know those students, so it's not like a competition. They're not being compared to someone else in their class. And you can, delete the student's name from the paper, but have a few examples or model essays that students have done in your class when they've done that assignment, so students see what you're looking for, what's a good example. And I also think it's good to show examples made by students in their program, in their university, in their school, because it's something that's achievable. Whereas if we're taking models from the book or from the internet, sometimes that just might intimidate students who might think, I can't write that. So this is something that's a more accessible goal. So one thing you can do is you have these models of previous students' essays, and you let students choose one, and then have students working in pairs or in small groups and have them fill out a form talking about the good points of the essay. Like you could have maybe a checklist or some sort of rubric for them to look at, like what do you need to have in the topic sentence, or what kind of things do you need to have in the body, or looking at specific categories like grammar, vocabulary, spelling, whatever you'd like students to look at. And then by having students looking at this example, like really paying attention and familiarizing themselves with this example of a good essay, then even the weaker students have more of an idea of what you're looking for, what good writing looks like. And then what you can do is tell the students that they can take one paragraph from that model essay and use it for their own essay. So, they can take the introductory paragraph or the concluding paragraph or one of the body paragraphs, and they can just lift it verbatim and put it in their essay and use it. Now, of course, you wouldn't grade that paragraph because it's, written by someone else, but that gives students already this start on the writing. And so it's less terrifying because they know, oh, I have a good introductory paragraph already. It also gives them a lot of the ideas to start with. So this isn't something you would do when your students have been doing academic writing for a long time and should be writing their own papers. This is something to scaffold students to reach a point of being confident and comfortable writing their own papers. This also helps students learn to, cite sources. You could tell them, this is how you would cite this person's paper, or you would tell them you need to include the citation. So sometimes students might plagiarize because they don't know how to write citations. And this way you're giving them practice so that in the future, they know how to properly cite. Another thing you could do is have students working with a pre-made essay or a model essay, and then they get to write it with their peers. They write an outline of that essay, and they include the thesis, the reasons, the evidence, so all of the main points of that essay. And then they take the outline and they have to write their individual essays, but they're allowed to use that outline. So for some students, writing is so scary because they can't even think of an idea to write about, and they can't think of the reasons or the evidence. So for this activity, they have that for them already in the outline, but they have to actually write the sentences. So this could be something where you're teaching good writing, but you're also wanting students to focus on, writing fluency or working on their grammar, etc. Another thing you could do is if you're teaching students certain things like how to use transition phrases, or how to use more varied vocabulary in their writing, or how to use more active verbs, you could have them take one of the model essays and tell them that they can hand in that model essay and hand in their essay, and their essay just needs to you need to change a certain number of transitional phrases, or they need to change a certain number of verbs or a certain number of adjectives. So they're working with finding synonyms, rewriting phrases, expanding their vocabulary, and of course you would only grade what they've highlighted in their essay as things that they change. So again, that's showing students again how to become familiar with good examples of writing. And then the last one, this is something that Goldsmith uses in his class. He actually tells students to go online and purchase an essay and then present it in class as their own. So they've changed nothing about this essay, but they have to give a presentation and present that essay in class as if they wrote it. So by doing that, he's forcing students to become intimately familiar with a really well-written essay, and they have to talk about the thesis and the evidence and the claims and all the ideas as if they wrote it. And again, this is giving them more practice with how to write and what good writing looks like. So again, I think these are things that we would do as we're scaffolding students. Obviously, I wouldn't give these as an assignment as a final, final academic essay assignment for advanced level students, but these are good ways to get students to that point of being able to write on their own. And before I move on, I want to look at some of the comments because I think they relate to what I just talked about. So uncreative writing as a guided practice gives them confidence. Yeah, absolutely. It is like when you're learning to walk, you need to have that practice, you need to have that support and that scaffolding. Also, yes, when they're stealing, they need to read widely, and that develops writing skills for sure. Students aren't going to steal something badly written. They're going to try to steal something that's good or something that sounds good, and that also forces them to read more. If you ask students to use the outline of existing essays, make changes in the vocabulary required to present the outcome. Okay, so make it like they have to give a summary instead of presenting it as their own. That's a great idea. And then at the same time, make students aware of using other authors' text. Yeah, I think that often students are already using other authors' texts or other students' text, but they're not giving credit. So by doing this, by openly saying, I'm giving you permission for this assignment to use someone else's work, that's how we can help teach them how to cite work properly, how to write the bibliography, etc., so that they don't get in trouble later for plagiarizing. And then, of course, we'll be doing other activities, teaching them how to paraphrase, etc., to avoid different types of plagiarism. Okay, so again, as I was talking about plagiarism, another reason for plagiarizing is that students aren't confident in their writing skills. So I've had students who had lower level writing abilities who were really, they were aware of that and they didn't know how to write academically. So they would plagiarize things or they didn't know how to write a certain genre of academic essay. So by giving them this practice and telling them, we know this isn't your writing, or I know this part isn't your writing, you're actually helping them learn how to get other pieces of writing, how to give sources, and also making them more familiar with good writing. Because I think that students just go online and plagiarize something, they're not reading that text over again to make sure they really understand it and why is it a good text and what makes that a good introductory paragraph. They're just taking it and handing it in. So in this way, we're allowing them to have more time examining and analyzing good writing. So some more things that you can do is that you can have students take a text that it could be a text that you've used in class or some other text, and they can update it. So for example, if you've read a story in class or a text, a book or something, and you could give the students the chance to rewrite the ending. How would they change the ending? So it's an existing text, they're just changing something about the ending, and then explain their reasons why. You could give students a piece of writing. It could be a famous, like a historical speech that, someone said something in 1960 and you make them update it to 2020. So they're stealing this famous piece of work or this existing text, and they're changing some of it to update it. So again, they're working with a pre-existing text. That's giving them familiarity, more time working with what a good writer's writing style, grammar, vocabulary, etc., and that's making them better writers. One of my favorite things is to have students rewrite a problematic work. So you could tell students they can choose something that they've read that they found troubling. Maybe they thought it was really sexist or racist or homophobic or xenophobic, or something was wrong with it that upset them, and they could rewrite it. So this is a way of bringing in the students' creativity, but also bringing critical pedagogy into the class, because we want students to really be examining the world around them, questioning things so that they're ready to be fully participating active citizens, informing the future. So one of my favorite examples of that is Lovecraft Country. So H.P. Lovecraft was an American horror and weird writer who was known for being openly racist. And Matt Ruff wrote a book called Lovecraft Country, and the director Misha Green directs a TV series that's out now. And they took H.P. Lovecraft's ideas and they formed it into this, Matt did originally, formed it into this story about racism in the United States. And it was a real, criticism of racism. And it's just a fantastic way of taking something that was problematic and questioning it and making it better. So, your students have all sorts of different, causes that they care about and things that might upset them, things that they might care really passionately about. And this is a great way of allowing them to bring that into the classroom. And they're writing at the same time. You could have students combine 2 or more works. They could be works that you looked at in class, or one work from another class, bring it into your class and combine it with something that you read in your class. These are just ways of having students think about, how can I use the existing works that are out there? Another thing I love about this is that, I'm really passionate about critical pedagogy, which, encourages students to question the status quo and kind of question, like, why are things the way they are, and also look at hierarchies and question hierarchies. And I think that just by telling students that we're allowing them to change text, we are giving them this power to analyze, to create, and to be more critical thinkers. Because often famous works, famous books, famous writers, parts of the canon, they're seen as like untouchable, perfect, unchangeable. And so to give students this power that you can change it, you can adapt it, you can change it, you can take it and do what you want with it for specific assignments, I think that's really empowering for students to see that, that no text is above reproach, and that no writer, however famous, can't, have their text changed or be questioned. So I think that's also another way of just improving students' critical thinking skills. Let's see. So here's an example of a way that you could have students kind of rework a famous text. This is a poem that I read when I was in college. Stanislaw Berencak, I hope I'm saying his name right, or Berencak, wrote this poem, Curriculum Vitae. And this is not all of it, but this is part of it. And I remember really being struck by this poem when I read it years ago. So I gave this poem to students, and I asked them to change the underlined sections. So this poem is about, there are historical, political, et cetera, implications to this. But in essence, he's talking about things that he learned before that he doesn't need any longer, is sort of the way I made it general. So I asked students to think about, what are some skills and accomplishments that you had in the past, or the things that you had to learn in the past that you don't need now? So when you're teaching students who are from other countries, this can be a really meaningful activity, because they can be talking about how things were different where they lived versus where they live now. When I did this with university students, they talked about how, like, the household rules they had to learn in their family about, curfew or certain things. And now that they're living on their own, they don't need to know that stuff anymore. And also to have students also along the lines of critical pedagogy, thinking about things we might have been taught when we were younger that we actually don't believe anymore, or that we wish we could unlearn, which I think is, another way of having students question society and question who they want to be as adults if they're younger students, or how they want to shape society. Some more examples of having students be really creative with text is that you can have them do erasure poetry. It's also called blackout poetry. And this is a form of found poetry in which you take an existing text. It doesn't have to be a poem, actually. And you can erase it, you can black out part of it, you can obscure portions of it, and then you create this new piece of text or new piece of work or art from what remains. And according to the Academy of American Poets, erasure poetry can be used to collaborate. It can be used to create a new text from old, and therefore you're creating a dialogue. So it's sort of like a dialogue between the original writer and then the student. Or it can be a means of confrontation, a challenge to a pre-existing text. So again, some critical thinking, critical pedagogy. Students could choose something that they find problematic and then rewrite it. And if you're not familiar with erasure poetry, or you haven't used it, in an introductory way with your students, I highly recommend you check out this blog at the bottom of the slide, trishhopkinson.com. She has a fantastic blog article about 6 different kinds of erasure poetry and really nice images. She talks about the fact that you can black out some words, like in this example that you see. You can cut out words. That might be something good for younger students who really need that kind of sensory activity. You can, again, another sensory thing is cover words on the text with something like seeds or some other kind of objects. You can create a collage over the words. So cover the words that you don't want with some, tissue paper or some design. Or you can combine image and text to have a new work of art. So I haven't been to this Instagram account, but this was one of the examples that Trish Hopkinson gave. And this is a person, Jamie Mortara, creates these poems from CNN news articles or like little news blurbs, and they black out certain parts and then just leave a new piece of art. Like, my brain is a stunning joke, right? So that can be, I don't know this person. I'm not sure if this is some sort of political commentary or just using, just a way of using existing text, but it's also kind of a way, especially, maybe students have so much news about the pandemic and they're constantly hearing about COVID-19, or there might be political things they're hearing about that just might seem like so much. Having students take something that they're tired of hearing about or something that they object to and black out parts of it and just create something new, I think is a really interesting way of doing a writing activity and allowing students to kind of express their feelings about current topics. Another thing you could do, another example of erasure poetry, is I used part of Olga Tokarczuk's acceptance speech at the Nobel banquet. And, this is just the first part of it, but you can read through it. And then, as students are reading through it, they're looking for vocabulary that they know, or maybe vocabulary they don't know, and looking it up and just circling a few words or crossing out words they don't want to create a new piece of art. So for example, choosing some of the words from that previous text, now you have a poem about royal ladies, because, the royal ladies are often in the news, lots of news stories about Meghan Markle. And now you have this poem that's the words are taken from Olga's words from before. And, you could have students post these, you could have students read them, explain them, teach any of the vocabulary words that might be new to their peers. It's just a great way of having them have fun and play with language, and attach an image. So another way that you can have students collaborate is finding a site online that allows for online collaboration, like projectrebuild.ca. They have a page of all of these houses, and you click on an image of a house, and it will take you to a poem, like this poem, Vancouver Special. And then down below, you can click on renovate this poem. So a student can take that pre-existing poem, use it, cut out some words, add some words, do whatever they like with it. And then that will then become posted online too. And then others can go on and take their poem and then rework that. And all of the related poems are listed on the site underneath the image of the house. So it's just another fun way of getting students to write, to play with language. Again, you can have students read these. You can have students talk about the choices they made. Why did they make a change? What did the poem mean before? How would they explain it and explain the meaning? And what does their new poem mean? Having students really practicing reading comprehension and just having fun with it. Another thing that you could do is to do corpus copying. So especially if you want students to get used to using an online corpus. So you could, for example, use this to pre-teach vocabulary or review vocabulary. You could assign a list of words, and then students go to a corpus, they search for the word, they search for collocates, they search for examples of that word in authentic use. And then they create text from it. So you could have the students creating conversations, creating poems, creating stories, creating worksheets, creating gap fills, creating any sort of new text to use. And they can lift the sentences verbatim from the corpus. And in that way, they're getting this, authentic examples of language and use, right? Or they could change them a bit. And then they should explain, what the original phrases were that they lifted, or the original examples. And that way their peers are all seeing more examples of this vocabulary language in authentic use. So for example, I went to COCA, or the Corpus of Contemporary American English, and looked up the word obsequious, thought that might be a good vocabulary word. Students would find matching strings. And then you have a whole bunch of examples here from different fictional journals or magazines, from TV, from the web, and then students can pick a few of those sentences that they like and then use them to create something new. And I think this is a good idea too, because often in COCA, so many of the examples might be really difficult for the students to understand, but they can find at least a couple that they can understand the meaning and the wording context and use those. So for example, a student could write a conversation that they then practice with the peer. You know, you're being obsequious. I thought obsequious subservience was a job requirement. That's actually a phrase I lifted from COCA. Very funny. I can imagine what you were like in high school. I was a bully. I roped in the more obsequious classmates to play the bit parts. And that was another line that I lifted from COCA. So of course the student would have to know what these mean, would have to look up the meaning because they'd have to explain them. Also for other students in the class, this is an example of vocabulary flooding where the same word is used again and again, and hopefully through the context being used in many different ways, they can learn the meaning without just having to use a dictionary or use a synonym. Another thing that you can do that's really fun is you could take any text that you've used in class or any text that you assign that you want students to really know and know it really well, or if you want students to practice doing, their paraphrasing abilities, you could take something like the text on the left is from the London Review of Books, and it's about Cézanne and Pissarro, talking about them. And then the text on the right is from The Guardian, and it's about the word disruption, the way that it's used in Silicon Valley. So you could give students, do kind of like a jigsaw, give each student in the group a paragraph, because this would take too long if you have a long text. And then when you give students the paragraph, they have to read it, they have to understand it, and then you would give them some kind of rewriting constraint and tell them, I want you to rewrite this, I want you to retain the original meaning, but I want you to not use the verb to be or the copula in the text. So they have to rewrite anytime they see an is, a was, a were, they have to rewrite that and use a different verb. Or you could tell them there are certain letters that they can't use. So for example, in the second one, it says there are certain phrases that you could tell students, you have to rewrite this paragraph without using a certain letter. Like you can't use the letter A. So they'd have to say something else like, I don't know, like numerous sentences exist or something like that that doesn't include the letter A. I wouldn't use the letter A. That's really difficult. But there could be a different letter that you use. I've done activities like this myself as a student, and it really makes you practice your vocabulary skills as you're trying to find a synonym that can substitute, that doesn't use the forbidden letter. It really causes you to rewrite sentences with different grammatical structure to avoid using certain letters. And it's a fantastic activity to improve your paraphrasing skills. And this helps with plagiarism because will help stop plagiarism, because as students know how to paraphrase better and write things in their own words and increase their vocabulary and their grammatical knowledge, they're going to be less likely to plagiarize. Another thing that's just really fun for students of all ages are using writing prompts and story starters. Like there's this thing called the Magic Realism bot on Twitter, although I would check that first to make sure it's age appropriate depending on your context. But there is a sort of like a story premise generated every 4 hours. So for example, a young adult writer switches bodies with a peacock. I know some students that would love writing about something like that. And as they're writing, they're using their English and they're, using vocabulary and grammar, and they're getting feedback, and it's making them more motivated to use the language. So these kind of activities can be really fun for students of different ages. Another site that generates plots is called Plot Generator. It's from the UK, and students can go and generate a plot for a story, a fairy tale, a movie, etc. I clicked on the short story link, and it has all of these spaces where you can write in your own words, like a feature of the place, or 2 adjectives to describe a place, 4 emotion adjectives. So that could be a way of students really tapping into their knowledge of different adjectives, different words, or if you hit suggest, the site will generate words. And that's also a good way to encourage students to use vocabulary that they wouldn't normally use, because we tend to use the same vocabulary all the time. And this can be something that I think sometimes some of the links actually generate the story, sometimes they generate part of it. And this is something that students can take and then create their own stories from this. You could have some sort of structure like, oh, you have to use at least 5 of the adjectives that the site suggests, etc. So another fun thing to do with uncreative writing is to have students find text online that doesn't have to be poetry, stories, academic essays. Have them just thinking about any kind of text and the way that we're surrounded by text, and to really look at it. So for this activity, you could have students look up on Google their favorite restaurant in town, or their favorite store, their favorite place, and then read the Google reviews. I mean, it doesn't have to be Google, but read the reviews, find English reviews. That's why Google reviews tends to have a lot of English reviews. And then take those reviews, take words, phrases from those reviews, and then create a new piece of writing. It could be a song, it could be a poem, it could be a story, whatever. And then, you could do something like have students post these, and then students have to, or without the name of the place, and students have to try to guess which place is being described. And it's also just a way, if you want to help students, scaffold them for learning to write reviews of things. So this is the way that people talk about things when they're recommending them, persuading people. It's a way of having students look at persuasive language. And, a lot of the adjectives: amazing, highly recommend, best pizza, perfect, nice, love it, etc. So that can be really fun. Similarly, I Googled Jejuv is great, because I was teaching in Jejuv before, and I looked at the search results that came up and plucked some of the phrases that came up. And I did this in the wintertime. So what I found was funny. Someone said, with all my heart, Jejuv is great, transport in Jejuv is great. There were a bunch of others, like restaurants in Jejuv are great. Everything in Jejuv is great. And then someone said, I'm surprised by the sadness. Maybe it's because of the weather. And this was in the winter time. So my students found this pretty funny. So it's another way of just finding things online, taking text, writing it, creating a new poem, creating a new piece of writing with that pre-existing text. And I think that one really fun thing to do too, especially like if you want to incorporate, oh, great, Kasha. If you want to incorporate students being more aware of all the language around them, is you can have them do some linguistic landscape pilfering. And so, for example, if you're going to say do a unit on food vocabulary, you could tell students to go to the grocery store and either take photos or write down all of the words they see in English. I'm saying English because this is IATEFL Poland. I know maybe we're teaching different languages. So go to the store, find examples of whatever the target language is, and take photos, write them down, and kind of make them aware of, wow, there's a lot of this language around me that I didn't notice. And you can then use those words to preview before you start your unit on food words. You can have students create a story using those words, or telling a story about what they found near those words. You could also use this to review something. Let's say your students have learned about art, and then you send them to an art museum and tell them to do the same. Find the English words, take photos, write them down, write a new text using some of the vocabulary that they learned in that unit about museums or about art. Thank you. Another thing that's related is you could have a group of students choose places on a map of their city, and choose, let's say, 5 places. And then together they have to go visit each of those spots and find all of the English words there. Again, take pictures, write them down. And so these could be restaurants they like, coffee shops, stores, parks, whatever they like. Then they have to agree on as a group. And then what they need to do is with each of those places, they have to take some of the language they found and write either a description of that place or write a memory of that place. So I was thinking that this could be really helpful if you have international students. This could be really helpful if you have students that, are new to the city they're living in, or just to get students to know and appreciate the city or the town they're living in, because they're going out together and looking at these spots. So this could look something like this. So this is from Jeju. I chose McDonald's because I thought they'd probably have some English there. So for example, maybe you have university students, they like going to McDonald's, and they go there, find the English words, and then they write a little memory about it using some of the language they found. Like, oh, I really love the, I don't know, tater tots or whatever. I don't eat at McDonald's, so I don't know. And then the other one, the castle, and they could, find if there's any English there, and then write up a little description like, this place teaches me about the history, allows me to appreciate my city, etc. And then you have all of these different maps of the city or town that students have created in the class that they can share with each other. They can give presentations on it. And it's text-based, yes. You're having them look at new words, find language around them, but it's also rapport building and allows students to connect with each other. So, all of these ideas and all of these activities are ways in which you're playing with language. You don't have to always be writing an academic essay. There doesn't always have to be a specific final genre of writing that they have to produce. It's a way of making students much more familiar with using that language. And yes, I agree. If they have an emotional attachment to a certain place, it helps them remember things better, for sure. So to recap, I talked about what is uncreative writing, and it's when you have students take a pre-existing text and they can create something new out of it. They can adapt it, erase it, black out some of it, put two different texts together, rewrite the ending, etc. And how can uncreative writing help our students? It can help them love the language class. It can help them be less afraid of writing. It can give them words so that they're not facing that blank page. It can teach them that we no longer think of writing as this lone genius activity. Many of my students really do think that writing is something that only certain people can do well, that you have to be really smart or really a genius to be able to write well. And it's more about practice and familiarity. It helps students to not plagiarize because we're giving them the tools to learn how to write sources. And we are, by allowing them to borrow and steal other works of art, but acknowledging it, we're helping them learn how to give credit for ideas they've taken or texts that they've used. We're helping them to paraphrase better, have better vocabulary, learn how to write better by looking at good examples. And some of the uncreative writing activities we talked about, some academic writing activities, lots of creative writing, ways of incorporating critical pedagogy, but above all, just ways in which we can make students really love learning and be filled with this passion. Even if they don't want to learn English, or even if they are taking your class because it's mandatory, we still want to make the class as interesting for the students as we can. So I wanted to ask you, so of these ideas that I shared, what are some things that you think you might be able to use in your context? So what is an idea that you think, oh, maybe that would work with my students? Or what is an idea or an activity that I shared that you have already used? Or an idea or activity that you have used that I didn't talk about that you'd like to share with others? So I love to hear your ideas. Oh, we have someone from Tunisia. So someone said they can't go anywhere, it's a pandemic. Well, it depends on what age your students are. My university students are on Instagram all the time going different places. So it depends. If you're teaching university students, you're teaching adults for sure. Yeah. And hopefully the pandemic won't last forever. What is the internet for? Oh yeah, true. They can, if they can't go somewhere, they can go somewhere on the internet. Like art museums, many of them have online viewing rooms that you can look, you can look around at the spaces without going there. Erasure poetry sounds interesting. Great. And if you use any of these ideas, I'll share my email. I would love to hear if you used something and how it worked or how it didn't work, so that I can share those ideas in future presentations. Erasure poetry and plot generator, great. plot generator, use Mad Libs. Mad Libs is a great idea, and that helps students with vocabulary. And if they're writing their own Mad Libs, they have to, write their own sentences, come up with their own ideas. That's fantastic. The linguistic landscape. Is there a way we can get the links you used? Yes, I'm going to share my email address at the end, and if you email me, I can send you the PDF with the links. I like the activity with choosing 5 places on the map and describing. Yeah, I mean, obviously now it's harder for students to visit those places, but they can visit them online, or, if they're outdoor places, from what I understand, people are going to parks and people are going to outdoor places. Let's see. I give my students copies of previous students' essays. Great. I found that really helped me as a student, being able to see what other people could do who are my age or with my education level. I like to use paraphrasing with my students, and for that reason, I use some of the ideas you presented. Great. Paraphrasing is so difficult, and it's a really important skill for our students to learn. British Natural History Museum has a great web to visit online. Perfect. Wonderful. Sightseeing in the city and finding places feeling associated as a starting point for essays, life stories. For sure, if students are talking about memories, experiences with certain places, that can help them tell their own stories. Absolutely. My students love wandering around town in groups, so looking for places where English is used would be great. Yeah, wonderful, for sure. Writing review is also great with teenagers. Yes, I think that, not that all teenagers are opinionated, but I definitely think that some would enjoy being able to write their own reviews about places, taking some pre-existing reviews, disagreeing with them, changing them. Google review task, look up reviews on Google out myself. Yeah, I mean, with that too, you could even have students look at reviews that are written in English versus reviews that are translated into English. Can we watch this webinar on YouTube? I think they are going to be putting this on YouTube. Language around us seems a fine idea, so looking at the linguistic landscape. Consider all your ideas equally interesting, especially for mixed ability. Great, great, wonderful. So I'll wait a little bit longer, maybe a minute or two, to see if anyone else has something to share as far as ideas that you could use, ideas that you have used. I've always enjoyed giving writing tasks to students for more than 20 years. Wonderful. I think that, there's just something that really, if you do creative writing or, uncreative writing, can really open students up. Simple letter in class, ask students to change it into more complex. Great. Plot generator, wonderful. Writing an app review, oh, that's great. So that's a real authentic task too. Students are actually writing a review, that they could put online that would help other people, and you giving them an authentic need to communicate. That's great. What else? I see a few more people are typing. Technical university students, they don't like writing. Let me think about this. For technical university students who don't like writing, I mean, even technical students who don't like writing have probably opinions, memories, strong ideas about places in their city. So maybe doing this activity with them, writing up about certain places. What about a certain career that they're going to go into? They could find things online, text related to that topic, and then you could have them do the activity where they read a text and they have to change it without using a certain letter or change, and they can't use a certain verb, for example. I've worked with a lot of reluctant readers. I think especially just making reading fun or making writing fun, allowing them to bring in personal experience into writing. Because I think some students really resist the idea of writing as this academic thing, and it's so removed from life and it's so elitist. So if you're having students write about their own lives, write about things related to them, yeah. The idea of modernizing classical text, sure. Yeah, and also with the technical students, finding some text relating to their future careers, having them react to them, respond to them, change them. Yeah, so they have to learn writing for their future jobs, but they probably only want to learn a certain kind of writing, or they really only want to learn as much as they need to learn for writing. At least that's been my experience with teaching students in the trades. They don't want to write about a book they read. They don't want to write about classics or literature. They want to write about things that are really useful. So actually, maybe in that case, having students bring in job ads for future jobs they want, look at the job description, what kind of writing is needed for that job, and have them go online and find that kind of writing, and then do these kinds of activities. They can go online, find the kind of writing required for their job. They get to steal it, but they have to adapt it a bit, or they have to present it as their own, or they have to explain to someone else how to write that kind of writing, for sure. Yeah, ESP vocabulary, for sure. Yeah. And also, I mean, if you use critical pedagogy, one of the things about ESP or teaching students in a specific trade is this idea of like, they have this goal they want to complete quickly, but we also want to give them time to think about their future careers, think about, like, question the way things are done, you know, kind of be creative, allow them to ask questions about their future careers and stuff, not just have it be all focused on learning to write this, learning to read this, learning to say this, giving them a little extra time to discuss things about society, maybe how people that go to trade school might be looked down upon, as opposed to people who have their PhDs or whatever, things like that. Have them discuss it in class, write about it in class is another way to get them interested in writing. Yes, I agree. I wanted to see if I had that book on hand. I agree that often that kind of writing is only related to their future professions, but if I present again on critical pedagogy, I have a lot to say about that. If students do writing on a regular basis, they get used to it and do their best to practice. Yeah, if you're just having them writing a little bit every day, telling students, you're only going to have to write for 10 minutes today, that is something that's doable. They can write for 10 minutes. So I think I see one more person typing. So I'll wait for one more comment. Okay, so I'll come back to I see someone's typing a comment, but I just want to give you some more sources. So this again is the source for the book that I got these ideas from, or not really, I didn't really get the ideas from, but I was kind of inspired by the book. So Kenneth Goldsmith, Uncreative Writing, Managing Language in the Digital Age. Also, if you like the blog Brain Pickings, in which they examine a lot of books, stories, and then kind of talk about themes, it's a really fascinating website for high-level students. The writer, Maria Popova, she reviewed this book and talked about uncreative writing. So it's a really fascinating article if you're interested in this idea of creativity and borrowing creativity, etc. So there are the links for those. And I see the last comment came up. When teaching professional, vocational, technical language, we often use real job ads to use as a real duties presentation. Yeah. I mean, I figured you did. Yeah, that's a great idea. And then they're using authentic text and taking authentic text. If you're interested in any kind of exchange programs for people around the world, exchanges.state.gov is the website. That's they have information about the fellowship that I'm doing. And if you are a teacher looking for free materials, there is an americanenglish.state.gov site that has lots of resources, free resources for teachers to use. And my email is wbarnosky2015@gmail.com. So if you email me and ask for the PDF, I can send it to you. I believe that Lucina is going to be putting this presentation online for people to view. And let me just respond to one last question. What kind of assessment do you utilize for uncreative writing? Well, you can only assess what the students themselves have created. So I think I would assess any kind of formal assessment for things like the example, yeah, of course, use a rubric. But like the example of having students take a former essay and then rewrite everything except the introductory paragraph, I think I would, obviously you would only be able to assess the part that they didn't write. So I would use rubrics for the students. They would see the rubrics beforehand, so they have clear instructions for the activity, for sure. So thank you everybody for attending this webinar. I know it was late in Poland. I loved hearing some of your ideas and your questions. I hope you can help your students be uncreative, and by that I mean creative, in their writing, and also help them navigate this world in which there is a lot of pre-existing text. They need to source things. They can use pre-existing things under certain conditions. So thank you very much. Hope to see you again in a future webinar.
Thank you very much, Willow, for being with us, and thanks for marvelous ideas. Very inspired. We'll be returning to you for more and more and more, because you're simply never-ending source of inspiration. Thanks a lot once again. We hold it very, very special that you are doing so many things for Polish teachers. Not only for Polish teachers, for teachers from all over the world, because today I think all the records have been broken when it comes to the number of participants, but also of as many countries and places around the world. And it's thanks to you, thanks to your ideas. Thanks a lot once again.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for sharing your ideas.
Yeah. Dear all, thank you very much for participation in our webinar. Please visit IATEFL Poland Facebook, where this webinar will be accessible to view once again if you simply want to take some more notes. And yes, the next webinar is very, very soon with Kevin McCoy, and after Kevin McCoy, then we've got another one with Jeff Tranta. So October is absolutely busy with all fantastic speakers. Thank you very much once again. For the certificate from the webinar, please join us at iatefl.org.pl. I am posting the email address where you can simply very quickly download the certificate. Thanks a lot once again, everybody. Thanks for being with us. And all the best to all the participants. Stay healthy, keep warm, keep optimistic, clean your hands, wear masks if possible, and sleep well. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.